Okay, I think I get it, Talion said. So, if everybody has a specialty, what's mine? In fact, what kind of magics can I use as a demon? It's really a long story, kid. Do you really want me to explain it? I mean, after all, I already told you I'm not going to be able to teach you that much when it comes to magic. Well, I want to know. My mom's a mage, and I want to be a mage. Ugh, you are such a stubborn kid. Fine, Silas replied. I'll explain a few things. To begin with, some of the most common categories that demons fall into once they know that they can utilize magic. The most common categories that you can fall into are destruction, creation, protection, restoration, summoning, binding, and finally manipulation. These are the most common categories that demons fall into. It's actually exceptionally rare for a demon to fall outside of one of these categories. They exist, of course, but once again, they're far less common. And then there's your secondary magical attribute. Wait a second, second magical attribute? What does that even mean? I don't understand. What's a second magical attribute? Well, it's basically a two-pronged characteristic. Each and every demon either falls into one or the other. Light and dark, good and bad. It's a balance of two. Take in mind that that doesn't actually mean that your powers are good or bad depending on which category you fall into. It's just a fixed element that affects the magic you cast. These two elements are known as light and dark, or life and death. You either specialize in life magic or death magic. This affects the magic you cast by infusing it with a specific kind of energy that makes it more effective when used in specific ways. It even affects the overall appearance of your magic, as well as the requirements for using it. To give you a basic understanding, let's say that you're attempting to cast a spell that heals someone, restoring their body after being severely injured. If you fall into the category of life energy, then spells that regenerate the body, that provide healing to someone, are more effective when you cast them, having an effect more than double that of if you were someone who fell into the category of death magic. Someone who has death magic as their two-pronged element can of course still use the spell, but as I said, with less than half the effect as someone who had life magic as their natural acquaintance. But on the other hand, if you were attempting to cast something specifically meant to destroy, then death magic is most likely the one that you'd want to have, as death magic element tends to lean itself well towards spells that inflict harm upon others. For instance, throwing bolts of lightning would be twice as powerful coming from somebody with a death magic specialty than coming from someone with a life magic specialty. In essence, it's all about the balance. And don't worry, kid. Usually your specialty in both life or death magic and your natural acquaintance with one of the multitude of types of magic that you can cast are usually in alignment with one another. Meaning that if you're a life magic specialist, it's far more likely that you'll inherit a category of magic as the one that you have the most aptitude for, that has to deal with the use of life magic. such as protection or restoration, even creation. These are elements which usually tend to favor life magic over death magic. Well, okay, I guess that makes sense. So, what's your specialty? Life or death magic? Well, mine is death magic. But once again, my magic isn't exactly a fair trade-off for my natural demonic abilities. It would be a waste to pour my energy into it. After all, both my natural magical abilities and my natural demonic abilities are basically the same, with the only difference being that my natural demonic abilities don't require me to read a bunch of books and know a bunch of complex spells in order to learn or develop. But I don't get it. If your specialty is death magic, then why don't you have something more blowy-uppy? Taleon replied. As I said, it's most common that your element, life or death, will align with your natural magical abilities. However, it's always possible that you're like me, an oddball. Death magic and illusion magic don't really mesh. This too is an element that just makes it sort of pointless for me to bother learning illusion magic at all. Illusion magic tends to lean towards the life magic side of things. It's much closer to the middle than a lot of other categories, but it still favors life magic over death magic, even if only by a little. So I just don't bother with it. Okay, so how do I find out what my categories are? Life and death, or one of those other categories that you listed? Are you really trying to do this? I already told you I'm not going to be able to really effectively train you in magic. Teach you a few things, but that's about it. Well, I want to learn it, Taleon replied, looking frustrated as he clutched his fists on top of the table, glaring daggers over towards his teacher. Fine, kid. Have it your way. We can find out what your specialty is fairly easily. For a moment, Salus turned towards Vera at the other end of the table, who had finished her dinner and was quietly flipping through one of her magical books. Hey, Miss Vera, you wouldn't by any chance have purified salt and sulfur, would you? Well, yes, she replied. I have them, of course. Why do you ask? Could you do me a favor and take some purified salt and some sulfur and then grind them together? I need it in order to check Talion's magical status. Oh, okay, she replied. As long as it's for Talion, I suppose I could go fetch some more ingredients later. So, after spending a bit of time diving into her magical purse and fetching out sulfur and purified salt, taking a bowl and grinding the powders together until it was of a smooth consistency throughout, she handed the bowl over to Silas, who began laying the powder out on the table in a pattern that had many strange symbols in it. It basically amounted to a circle with a multitude of strange symbols outside of it, and some awkward lines that seemed to connect to the circle itself. It only took a few moments for him to finish it. Afterwards, he set the bowl down and looked towards Talion. Okay, kid, this works fairly easily. All of these different symbols are the different magical specialties that someone can fall into. There are about 10 of them altogether, for the primaries. And then, of course, you have these two big circles outside of those 10, which stand for your magical specialty, life or death. All you have to do is place your hand on the center of the circle, Once you do, your demonic energy will naturally infuse itself with the substance that I've placed on it, and will get a reaction from the mixture of salt and sulfur that we placed. Basically, the ones that you're acquainted with will catch fire, and the others won't. So, all you have to do to find out what category you stand in is place your hand in the circle.